On April the 23rd, 2018, the streets of Toronto became the scene of one of the deadliest vehicular attacks in Canadian history. A white rental van driven by Alek Minassian ploughed through a busy sidewalk, killing 10 people and injuring 16 others in a brutal, deliberate assault. But who was Alek Minassian? What drove him to commit such an unthinkable act? What does his story reveal about the hidden dangers in our digital world? Today, we are going to explore the life, motivations, psychological complexities, and social forces surrounding this tragedy. This story is not just about one man. It is about the hidden communities that fester online, the warning signs we missed, and the resilience of a city that refused to be broken. Stay with us as we explore the untold depths of this case, weaving together detailed timelines, psychological analysis, community responses, and the dangerous spread of online radicalization. This is the 2018 Toronto van attack. Alek Minassian, a deep dive. Alek Minassian was born on November 3rd, 1992, in Richmond Hill, Ontario, a quiet suburban area just north of Toronto. He was the second child of Var Minassian and Sona Minassian, an Armenian-Canadian family. From an early age, Alek stood out, but not in a way that brought him closer to others. Diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder as a child, Alek struggled to form typical social connections. Teachers noted his rigidity, his preference for structure, and his difficulty understanding social cues. In elementary school, he was often seen alone. While other children played in groups, Alek would sit quietly, sometimes rocking back and forth, fixated on his own routines. Former classmates described him as polite but distant. Some recall his frequent hand movements, repetitive gestures that seemed to calm him when overwhelmed. Others remember the way he would avoid eye contact, how he would sometimes recite facts about technology, programming languages, or mathematics with robotic precision. He excelled in structured subjects, mathematics, computer science, where there were clear answers, right or wrong, yes or no. But the social world, it was chaos to him. His difficulties weren't just isolated to the classroom. According to those who knew him, Alek faced persistent bullying throughout his school years. Whether it was because of his awkwardness, his visible tics, or his inability to fit in, the bullying compounded his isolation. In a world where friendship seemed unreachable, Alek turned inward. He began spending increasing amounts of time on his computer, diving deep into online communities where he felt he could belong, or at least be left alone. The internet for Alek became a second home, a place where his social difficulties didn't matter. A place where he could be a part of something without the terrifying complexity of real-world interaction. But the internet is not always a safe refuge. As Alek's isolation grew, so did his reliance on online spaces that promised understanding but delivered something far more dangerous. His story is one of missed opportunities, missed chances to intervene, to offer help, to notice the cracks before they shattered. As we move deeper into this story, we begin to understand how Alek Minassian's life intersected with one of the most disturbing subcultures of the digital age, the Incel movement. To understand Alek Minassian's mindset, we need to understand the world he was immersing himself in. A world where rage, misogyny, and alienation festered unchecked. The Incel movement. Incel stands for involuntary celibate. At its surface, the term describes individuals who feel unable to find romantic or sexual partners despite wanting them. But within these online communities, the term has mutated into something far more toxic. On platforms like 4chan's, R9K, Board and certain Reddit subforums, the incel community became an echo chamber of hatred, self-loathing and violent fantasies. Members of these forums blamed women and society at large for their perceived rejection. They celebrated mass shooters who targeted women and idolized men who committed acts of violence. One of the most influential figures in these communities was Elliot Rodger, the self-proclaimed supreme gentleman who in the 2014 murdered 6 people in Isla Vista, California. Before taking his own life, Rodger left behind a manifesto detailing his hatred for women and his belief that he was entitled to their affection. For incels, Rodger became a martyr. His violent rampage was glorified across incel forums. Alek Minassian would later directly reference him, even calling for an incel rebellion. Minassian's now infamous Facebook post just minutes before the Toronto attack read, "Private Recruit Minassian Infantry 00010. The incel rebellion has already begun. We will overthrow the Chads and the Stacys. All hail the supreme gentleman Elliot Rodger." This post was not random, it was steeped in incel jargon. Chads are men incels view as genetically superior, who effortlessly attract women. Stacys are the women they perceive as unattainable. To Minassian, the people he targeted on the sidewalk symbolized the society that had rejected him. Experts on online extremism point out that incel communities foster a dangerous progression from self-pity to anger to glorification of violence. Members validate each other's bitterness, reinforcing the worldview where violent retribution seems justified. But it was just the ideology. It was the process, the constant exposure to posts celebrating violence, the memes mocking victims, the endless cycles of shared loneliness and rage. These created a psychological feedback loop. Minassian wasn't born with this hatred, he was conditioned into it. Psychologists later determined that Minassian's rigid thinking stemming from his autism made him especially vulnerable to these black and white belief systems. His inability to process social nuance may have made him susceptible to the oversimplified us versus them narratives common in extremist forums. Yet, we must be clear, autism does not cause violence. Most people on the autism spectrum are peaceful. Minassian's autism may have been a factor in his social isolation and in his susceptibility to extremist beliefs. But it is not an excuse, nor does it explain the entire picture. The incel ideology is not just about sex or rejection. At its core, it's about entitlement, the belief that one is owed love, attention, and sexual access. Whether that entitlement is unmet, it can curdle into rage and in some cases into violence. Alek Minassian did not create this ideology, but he embraced it and ultimately he weaponized it. As we move to the next chapter, we will examine the timeline leading up to the attack. We'll piece together the critical moments and missed warning signs, and the chilling final preparations that culminated in that terrible day. To understand how Alek Minassian's dark plans came to fruition, we need to look closely at the timeline leading up to the attack, the hours, days and months that set the stage for tragedy. In the weeks before April the 23rd, Minassian's behaviour began to shift noticeably. Friends and acquaintances reported that he had become more withdrawn, more focused on extremist online content, and less responsive to outreach attempts. On the morning of April 23rd, Minassian visited a Walmart store in Toronto where he purchased items later found in his van, including a large knife and materials that suggested preparation for violence. That afternoon, he rented a white van from a local enterprise rent-a-car, the vehicle that would become his weapon. Surveillance footage later showed him sitting alone in the van, seemingly rehearsing or psyching himself up. At approximately 1:30 p.m, Minassian drove onto the busy sidewalks of Yonge Street, ploughing into pedestrians indiscriminately. Witnesses described the scene as chaotic and horrifying. Screams, people diving out of the way, and the sound of the van striking bodies and obstacles. The attack lasted just over a minute, but in that time, 10 people lost their lives and 16 others were seriously injured. Minassian's rampage ended when police confronted and arrested him without resistance. Emergency crews arrived quickly, rushing victims to hospitals. The city was stunned and grief soon turned to questions. Could this have been prevented? Were there warning signs? What drove Minassian to such violence? Investigations revealed no prior criminal record, but a deep dive into Minassian's online footprint revealed radicalization and growing isolation. His Facebook post minutes before the attack referenced the Incel rebellion and Elliot Rodger, signaling his commitment to violent misogynistic ideology. This chapter is a reminder of the dangers of loneliness, alienation, and extremist beliefs merging into violence. Next, we'll explore the aftermath, the trial, the city's response, and ongoing conversations about mental health, radicalization, and public safety. In the wake of the attack, Toronto was shaken to its core. The victims' families, friends, and the entire community grappled with grief and disbelief. City officials quickly rallied support services for survivors and their families. The memorials that sprung up along Yonge Street became places of mourning and unity, a testament to the city's resilience. But questions lingered. How could this happen here? What would have been done to prevent it, and how do we protect vulnerable individuals before isolation turns violent? The tragedy spurred renewed conversations about mental health resources, online radicalization, and social alienation. Toronto's police also reviewed procedures on preventing such attacks and monitoring potential threats without infringing on civil rights. In the months that followed, Alek Minassian faced trial. Charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder and 16 counts of attempted murder, the court proceedings drew national attention. Minassian pleaded not criminally responsible, citing his autism spectrum disorder and mental state at the time of the attack. Psychiatrists evaluated him, debating whether his actions were the result of a psychotic episode or premeditated hate crime. Trial was a tense examination of the intersection of mental health and criminal responsibility. Victims' families spoke with courage and heart, demanding justice. Ultimately, in March 2021, Minassian was found guilty on all counts, marking a landmark decision in Canadian legal history. The Alek Minassian case is not just a story of one individual's descent into violence. It shines a light on larger issues: the impact of social isolation, the dangers of online radicalization, and the critical need for early intervention. Experts emphasize the importance of better mental health support, education on recognizing extremist signs, and the need to create inclusive communities. Social media companies face increasing pressure to monitor and limit hate-filled content that fuels such ideologies. Alek Minassian's attack remains a stark warning behind the headlines are real lives, victims, families, and communities forever changed. But through understanding, dialogue, and proactive support, we can hope to prevent such tragedies in the future. Thank you for joining this deep dive into the 2018 Toronto van attack. If you found this video insightful, please like, subscribe, and share to help spread awareness. Stay safe, and remember, every life matters.